11. It's the last of these 3. So there are like sets of 3 here. There are sets of 2, sets of 3 in ISOPANISAD. So let's chant our Mangala Charana prayers. Om Ajnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhistam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. I was born in the darkest of ignorance, and my spiritual master opened my eyes with the torch of knowledge. I offer my respectful obeisances unto him. Okay. So what was mantra 9? It was not too long ago this time. What was mantra 9? Mantra 9, we heard about cultivating knowledge, cultivating ignorance, and what happens? This was so-called knowledge. It was avidya and vidya, but vidya was so-called knowledge. So both of them are going to the dark regions of hell, right? One is going to even darker region. Which one? The one who's trying to cultivate the so-called knowledge. And then in text 10, we saw how by cultivating knowledge and ignorance, especially when the knowledge is received from the right source, then you have a completely different destination. And in this mantra, we're going to hear about how we want to gain immortality, then we have to know both. So this is the verse about balance. Let me share screen. Mantra 11, right? There's it. You can't see it even when you minimize it, I think. Yeah. All right. So this is about balance. So let's chant the verse. It's very similar to text 9. Vidyam cha yas tatvedo bhayam saha avidyam mrityum titva vidyam mritam. Sorry, not like text 9. I'm ahead of myself. I was thinking of starting mantra 12. 12 is like 9, but this is not like any others. So translation, only one who can learn the process of, just 1 second. Yeah. Only one who can learn the process of nations and that of transcendental knowledge side by side can transcend the influence of repeated birth and death and enjoy the full blessings of immortality. So this mantra is pointing to a transcendental goal. It's a mysterious mantra in one sense. There's a lot of mystery in the Upanishads because the language is not very kind of just straight. But in this verse, we're going to learn about how to make the best use of a bad bargain. We got a body and we cannot actually get out of it right away. But how can we get out of it eventually? So it's pointing to this transcendental goal. So again, so just very quickly, mantra 9, by cultivating avidya and vidya, we get the same dark destination. By cultivating avidya and vidya, and mantra 10 we heard, we get different destinations. Why? Because the source for that vidya is different here. And then mantra 11, if we want to gain immortality, we have to know both. And so this verse is all about balance. So 9 was extremes, 10 was receiving the knowledge through parampara, and 11 is all about balance. So this is pointing to a transcendental goal, amritam ashnate, deathlessness, right? Because Prabhupada starts the purport with saying how the living entities, we all want a permanent life. None of us really like change, but everything keeps changing constantly in this world. We want a place where we can stay for good. We don't want death because we are Satchidananda by nature. We want to just settle down and just stay. We want things to be peaceful so we can just do our things. But the laws of nature are so cruel that they don't allow this. They're constantly changing. So ISOPANISAD wants to teach us first what this immortality really is. What is it that, on what platform should we even be looking for this immortality? And Prabhupada gives the example of Hiranyakashipu, right? So we have to understand what real immortality is, because we don't want to make the mistake that Hiranyakashipu made. Yeah, Hiranyakashipu, we all know the story, so we're not going to get into it. So Hiranyakashipu, he did all these austerities, right? And it disturbed even the demigods and so on. And, Lord Brahma appeared and he asked for a boon of immortality. And Brahma said, well, no, I can't do that because even I am not Amara or deathless, as Prabhupada uses that word Amara in this purport. And so, and we know the rest of the story. So we don't want to make the mistake that Hiranyakashipu made. Srila Prabhupada, I found it amusing. Prabhupada, he says, Hiranya means gold and Kashipu means soft bed. This cunning gentleman, Prabhupada called him a gentleman, but then he used the word cunning, and cunning means like just really like sly, wily, crafty, shrewd, calculating kind of. So he was calculating how to become immortal. And he really tried to bribe the greatest living entity, Lord Brahma. Forget that. Yes. So what was Hiranyakashipu's whole calculation based on? His calculation was only in terms of his body and how, to make the body immortal, right? And this is also the idea of the whole, the scientists, the whole scientific world. So Prabhupada calls these scientists the tiny Hiranyakashipus of today, who don't even have the capacity that Hiranyakashipu had actually. So, we really have to understand, how can we attain this goal of immortality? So it cannot be achieved. We want this immortality. We don't want change. We want eternality, but we cannot get that in this world. We cannot get that in this body. We cannot get it by any material means or knowledge. And we cannot get it by trying to pierce through the laws of nature, right? We know this verse, Daivi Esha Gunamayi Mama Maya Duratyaya, right? It's Duratyaya, it's relentless. The laws of nature are relentless. You cannot overcome them. There's only one way. Mayam evam tarantite, that if you surrender to me, Krishna says, then yeah, you can cross this world. So the whole point is just that Hiranyakashipu, he wanted money and sex life. He was one of the most powerful materialists. But even Hiranyakashipu, as powerful as he was, he could not become deathless by his various plans. So what can the tiny Hiranyakashipus, of this world, what can they do, right? We're very, very tiny compared to Hiranyakashipu. None of us in this material world have the powers actually that he had. He wanted to change the whole, he wanted to change the laws of nature. He wanted to build a staircase to heaven, right? He had even conquered the heavenly planets. But that's what Prabhupada is really impressing in the first half of the purport, that we have to kind of really get this. We have to get it, that we cannot become immortal like this. Like Bhakti Siddhanta, he makes a statement. He says that if we come to the conclusion, if a spiritualist comes to the conclusion that there is no hope of finding happiness in this material world, then one has made the greatest, or one has taken the greatest step in his spiritual advancement. Because once you give up that hope, you're not going to keep trying, again and again for some happiness here. So if we really get this, that what I want is not possible in this world, in this body, by any material means, through any laws of nature, any manipulation of the laws of nature, then we're not going to look at this place at all. So much energy will be saved, right? So Prabhupada says, in order to attain a permanent life, one must be prepared to go back to Godhead. And only one who can learn the process of nations and that of transcendental knowledge side by side can transcend the influence of repeated birth and death and enjoy the full blessings of immortality, right? So what is this whole side-by-side business that we're hearing about in this verse, right? That we're supposed to learn Vidya and supposed to learn Avidya too. What does it really mean? Devotees, my Guru Maharaj likes to say, devotees like to ask this question, Maharaj, what does it really mean? As though like, if you don't use the word really, then you're not going to get the real answer. Anyway, but so in the Srimad Bhagavatam, in the very first verse, we hear Janmadi Yasya Yaton Vayad Itaratas Charte Shrabhignya Surat. So there's this two words, Anvayad and Itaratas. That's talking about directly and indirectly, right? There's also the Chaturshloki verse, one of the Chaturshloki verses of the Bhagavatam, where it said, a person who's searching after the supreme absolute truth, the personality of Godhead, must certainly search for it up to this in all circumstances, in all space and time, and both directly and indirectly. So we're hearing in the Bhagavatam that we must cultivate transcendental knowledge, both directly and indirectly. And that's also what ISOPANISAD is referring to in this verse. So let's look at what does it mean, this directly and indirectly. So directly means cultivating Vidya. So Vidya means real knowledge. And we heard what is real knowledge. What was real knowledge? We just heard that in Mantra 10. Real knowledge means? Quickly. What did Krishna do?
Real knowledge means to serve everything which is related to Krishna.
Okay,
to
so
see
everything
in
that
relation.
to see everything in relation to Krishna. And it was those 18 items or 28 items, 18 items in Bhagavad Gita, 20 items in ISOPANISAD, right? Is the process by which one goes back to Godhead. Yeah. And here Prabhupada says it's a different process. It's a different branch of knowledge, and it has to be learned from revealed Vedic scriptures, such as the Upanishads, Vedanta Sutra, Bhagavad Gita, and Srimad Bhagavatam. Right? Real knowledge also means that we want to hear from the dhiras, iti shushma dhiranam, what we learned in Mantra 10, right? It also means that we want to engage directly in devotional service in the Sankirtan movement. Yes? So this is Vidya, cultivating Vidya is really the direct process, and it's that which gives us the positive impetus in one sense. Indirectly means cultivating avidya. Now, what does cultivating avidya mean? Does cultivating avidya mean that, oh, yeah, so I should learn about all this material knowledge, how to live better, how to have more sense gratification? Is that what it's saying? No, that's not what it's saying. It's saying quite different. What it's saying is learn from Shastra, learn from Guru, what is avidya, and stay away from it. So this is what really cultivating avidya means in this verse. Learning the nature of avidya and then staying away from it. So learning our lessons from the laws of nature. And what are those lessons? Again, Prabhupada writes, just picked some sentences from the purport. The miseries of this material world serve to indirectly remind us of our incompatibility with dead matter. So we try to mix spirit and matter so much, right? It's like mixing oil and water, like we'd mix oil and water to make a salad dressing. But you leave it alone for a while, the oil and water separate. So we're trying very hard, but it's not happening. And when the incompatibility becomes so much, it causes great anguish in our life, great misery. One may go through a real bottom point in their life. And from that, what are we meant to learn? We're meant to learn that, I'm not compatible with this dead matter. So, living entities, or by seeing the defects of this material world, we can use that as an impetus to cultivate vidya. Prabhupada says, intelligent living entities generally take note of these reminders and engage themselves in the culture of vidya or transcendental knowledge. Human life is the best opportunity for the culture of spiritual knowledge. And a human being who does not take advantage of this opportunity is called a Naradana, the lowest of human beings, right? So you also learned probably in Nectar of Devotion that the first qualification for approaching a spiritual master is to actually become convinced that the material world is not a fit place to stay, right? Because, sometimes when we say things like this, sometimes people say, oh, these Hare Krishnas are too much. They're so morbid, they're just always talking about the negative. It's really not so bad, this world. But, wait a little. Life happens to everyone. Disease happens, cancer happens, people lose jobs, people lose their dear relatives, and so on. And there's always miseries, and they're meant to teach us. So Prabhupada is telling us that these sufferings should be used as an impetus to go to Vidya. And that will only come about if we understand that, we're not, it's just not meant to be like what I'm imagining to be in this world. And also, cultivating avidya means to maintain the material body and keeping the body and the mind fit and healthy so that we can actually practice spiritual life nicely, right? Prabhupada again writes in this purport, he says this body is a lump of ignorance. So this lump of ignorance, however, needs to be maintained by regulating for the purpose of cultivating spiritual knowledge, just like we learn in the Bhagavad Gita. There's such resonance between our scriptures. So in the Bhagavad Gita, we hear in the 6th chapter, Yukta Hara Viharasya Yukta Chetasa Karmasu, right? So where Krishna is also talking about regulation of body, mind, spirit. And if you do that, then it can mitigate all material pains. And so when material pains are mitigated, then it's much easier to focus on your spiritual life naturally, right? And here in this purport, Prabhupada also writes, to make the best use of a bad bargain is the appropriate expression. The culture of spiritual knowledge necessitates the help of the body and mind. Therefore, maintenance of the body and mind is required if we are to reach our goal. So maintaining means that, working and earning some, just livelihood, maintenance, money for our family and so on. It could mean taking care of our health. It could mean taking care of our family properly and so on. It's basically our prescribed duties, right? So extremes means that, we're maybe surrendering or, but we are not keeping this balance actually, right? When we all start Krishna consciousness, sometimes we just completely neglect the body. We are so inspired, we're just serving, and we neglect the body, we neglect our family, we neglect our parents, right? And this has happened to many devotees, especially early on in the movement. I mean, the movement is a lot more mature right now, but by the time these devotees would hit 40 and 50, they all would get sick because they didn't maintain their body properly. They never exercised. They never did, really anything. So then they get very sick and then they have to just maintain their body as a full-time service then, right? Or in the early days, people, sometimes would take these trips from one coast to the other, and they neglected their children so much they would not even feed their children properly, because out of their enthusiasm for preaching. So that's not proper. Yeah. Or sometimes fanatical preaching, like even in Christianity, like the born again Christians will say, if you don't believe in Jesus, you'll just go to hell and you'll suffer forever. Right? It's just, it's just like if we see just maybe even like our neighbor doing something wrong to their child, we may call the police, or we don't actually like to see that, right? So God is not like an unreasonable person at all in that way. So by this so-called preaching, faith of the innocent in God was destroyed so much. Or sometimes another example is just, sometimes we surrender to spiritual authorities, but our surrender is so external. It's like we're trying to gain some sense of identity for ourselves, or sometimes we're playing victim. You want me to surrender, I'll surrender. And we tend to not, again, pay attention to the body, mind, family, etc. Yeah. So we don't want to go to any of these extremes. We want to balance things properly. So this is the kind of cultivating of it. Yeah. And another thing is to remove anarthas, or unwanted things in the heart, right? Even for that, we're working with avidya. Yes. So Baladev Vidyabhushan particularly talks about this. So to remove anarthas, we deal with avidya, or the mind, right? So there's a whole, some groups of devotees, right, who just like to forget about all anarthas or regulations or anything like that, and they just want to chant and sing and dance and so on. And so these are like the sahajiya kind of people, where they're not really concerned about the contamination of the heart. They just want to delve into so-called vidya in one sense. But because of this, all kinds of apasampradayas came about. Yeah, before Bhaktivinoda Thakur, this happened, and there were like 13 apasampradayas, and so much degradation happened. And Bhaktisiddhanta came after that, and he preached very forcefully to cut through all of this. So, and on the other hand, the other extreme is just working on anarthas without cultivating vidya simultaneously. Then what happens also is that You're just removing what is not. Okay, I don't want this, I don't want this, I don't want this. So it's like the neti process of the impersonalists. So you're removing all the anarthas, but then there's again nothing positive reached. So that also can lead to another kind of crisis, because you remove everything that you're not, but who are you? So then people have a major identity crisis. So both have to go on parallelly. So by working with matter, we remove actually the temporary. It's like removing the thorn with the thorn, and then we gain amrita. So this is the whole synthesis part. And this synthesis is done with the help of vidya, which is gained through the parampara. Yeah. So, so this is our negative impetus, the cultivating of vidya part. So then there is the analogy of fever that Prabhupada talks about. It's relatively easy to understand, but just go through it just a little bit. So high fever means excess sense gratification, right? Excess material endeavor. So if one is not a good doctor or something, he may say, oh, that the cause of disease is high fever, and therefore you should sit in the refrigerator and bring the temperature down or something. I mean, this is just, nobody does this, but I'm just saying. So bring the temperature down even below the normal temperature, but that's also not good. So one cannot survive. So the fever should not, so there's a normal temperature, and even to bring to the normal temperature, it shouldn't be sudden. The fever should be reduced gradually, right? I once heard a story of a lady who had a maid servant. And this lady had a high fever. She had typhoid, and she went to the doctor. And the doctor said her fever was 102 degrees. And then the doctor said, but you're doing much better than your maidservant. Your maidservant has 105-degree fever. No, actually, he doesn't say you're doing much better. You're doing okay. Your maidservant actually has 105 fever. So this lady, she said, oh, how come she has more fever than me? So this is like the discussion of the materialists, just wanting just more sense gratification in some way. So Srila Prabhupada says that this sense gratification is the disease, and it has to be brought down. Without stopping all sense gratification, we have to reach a healthy balance state, because we all have a temperature, right? 98.6, which is the normal temperature. And if the fever goes too high, Prabhupada says, does he say that? I don't remember. But anyway, if it's too high, I think he says it. It's like, 107 degrees. 107 degrees. It's like, in the form of atomic energy ready to blow up, right? So the normal temperature should be maintained at 98.6. And the great sages and the saints of India, they've done so, Prabhupada says, by attempting to have a balanced program of spiritual and material knowledge. They never allow the misuse of human intelligence for diseased sense gratification. Yes. So Vidyan, so then ISOPANISAD also instructs us not to make one-sided attempts to win the struggle for existence. So one-sided attempts could mean that, you're just trying to prevent falling off from one side of the road, right? But you're going so much on the other side that you forget that you may fall from the other side too, right? So this balance is, again, very important, because sometimes when we are learning something, we get inspired by that, and we just tend to overlean on one side. And then we forget what's happening on the other side. So sometimes, like devotees, maybe they're trying to learn to like speak up and become assertive and so on. But then they overdo it so much so that like nobody can then like even have a relationship with them. They're so assertive and that boundary is so strong that it's just too intense that you cannot also just even penetrate and have a little relationship, right? So we all have our little things as we're trying to grow. We tend to just go this way or that way. That's our tendency. But we want to bring about, this balance. Like if one disciple may go to a guru and, the disciple is saying, oh, I'm not making advancement. And the guru may say, eat more, sleep more, and just also have some recreation. Another disciple may go and the guru may say, eat less, sleep less, enjoy less, right? And they can seem like two opposites. But the guru is saying according to the person, he understands the nature of the person, and based on that, some instructions being given. So this whole thing about balance, it really requires some maturity, some wisdom, and sometimes, especially in Kali Yuga, maybe more than sometimes, I would say, it really requires the school of hard knocks. We have to go through a lot of pain, and get a lot of scars, and then we can grow actually. So, yeah. And we talked about this. So further. So the Shastra, of course, is giving us, so much clarity in all of this. And this is a beautiful verse also that talks about the same principle from the Srimad Bhagavatam. If somehow or other, this is Krishna speaking to Uddhava in the Uddhava Gita, if somehow or other, by good fortune, one develops faith in hearing and chanting my glories, such a person, being neither very disgusted with, nor very much attached to material life, should achieve perfection through the path of loving devotion to me. So Krishna is again speaking about the balance here. It's wonderful that you gain faith for hearing and chanting my glories, but don't become overly disgusted, right, with the material world, because that's also hard. Keep a balance. Use those things. See those things in connection with me, actually. And that's also Rupa Goswami's teaching in Nectar of Devotion. When one is not, this is the Yukta Vairagya verse. When one is not attached to anything, but at the same time accepts everything in relation to Krishna, one is rightly situated above possessiveness. On the other hand, one who rejects everything without knowledge of its relationship to Krishna is not as complete in his renunciation. Yes. So the whole, in the Vedas, there are two paths described, right? The Pravritti Marg and the Nivritti Marg. So the Pravritti Marg is the regulated sense enjoyment. It's the progressive varnashram system where the fever of the sense gratification is basically reduced little by little by little over many, many, many lifetimes, many, many lifetimes. But for us, such a program is not very practical because we don't actually have the varnashram system anymore. And everything is so degraded in our current society. So we don't want to follow this kind of too gradual of a process. So Prabhupada advised us, finish up in this lifetime. So we follow the Nivritti Marg. We put all our energy in direct devotional service and we practice Yukta Vairagya and use everything in devotional service. Yeah. So I would like y'all now to think about some questions. Maybe we can answer some of these questions, together too. And some you can do at your own time. I don't know if y'all have groups. Navdeep, Sachi, do y'all have like groups, study groups for your Bhakti Shastri that where devotees meet together and discuss things?
I am not aware of groups, Mataji. Maybe other devotees have formed groups.
Okay.
I'm
Okay.
not aware of groups.
Yeah, I think it would be really nice to discuss this in groups. I mean, I would have, yeah, if it was a live class, we would quickly break you all into groups and do it. But I had a few questions for you all to reflect on. You can think of your own experiences of learning through suffering, and you can share with someone, because I think we've all learned some lessons by going through suffering. And you can also discuss the danger of knowing only the bliss of spiritual life without knowing the miseries of material existence or material knowledge, and also vice versa. Vice versa means that the dangers of only knowing the miseries of material existence but not knowing the bliss of spiritual life. So this is the contrast between the Sahajiism and the impersonalism, really, or fanaticism. How do we restrict sense gratification? And what is the result of untimely renunciation? Think of just examples in your life, think of examples in others' lives around you, and kind of bring it to a point where how you can apply it in a very balanced way in your life, right? How much should we tolerate the pushings of the mind and senses? So this is a nice question to discuss. So should we just give it up altogether? How much should we tolerate? As much as necessary to keep our body and mind together in a healthy state. That's the answer that Srimad Bhagavatam gives, right? Kamasya nendriya priti labo jivetaya vata jivasya tattva jignasa nartho yatcheha karmabi, in the second chapter of first canto. So as much as necessary to keep the body and mind together and in a happy, healthy state. And how much that is, that's going to differ based on our level of advancement. But we should all accept things based on our level of advancement, not too much beyond it, not below it. And that's the principle of Niyamagraha that you learned in Nectar of Instruction. So in Bhakti Aloka, Bhaktivinoda Thakur talks about a further meaning of Niyamagraha beyond what you learn in Nectar of Instruction. That is that, following the rules and regulations according to your level of advancement, not above or below, because both are not helpful. And then you can discuss also some examples of extremes of Vidya and Avidya in ISKCON, and how you can bring about that balance in your life, in your family. Okay, and then after this, there's just some flowcharts which may be useful for your exams. I'm going to share. I have to share also text 9 and 10. I'll do all of them together today. Any questions or comments? Okay. Not so many devotees participating. Nothing at all? No reflections either? Okay. All right. Nice to get a little feedback after you spoke for 40 minutes nonstop, Otherwise, I'm wondering what's happening. So any kind of feedback is good.
Hare
Just
Krishna
saying
Mataji.
something. Hare Krishna.
I always thought that devotional service is very easy. So I'm in a
Uh-huh.
shock, in a state of shock that it's really difficult after going through
Ah,
this ISOPANISAD.
really?
Yeah,
I thought it's making it easier for you, no?
no, there are so many conditions and all that, but I always under the impression that it's very easy to go back to Goloka, and knowledge is
Mm.
easy to get, and it's also experiencing also easy, I thought. and it's all seems to be very difficult. Yeah? There is a huge amount of practice is required, dedication is required, yeah, introspection is
Yes.
required, and
A lot of introspection is
yeah,
required,
is
certainly.
required. Yeah, and improvement is required. There are so
Yes.
many aspects that I'm getting now, so
Mm.
that's why I'm silent.
You're processing, you're taking it in. Yeah. I mean, devotional service is very simple. It's not complicated, actually. It is just that we're trying to grasp really the principles. Devotional service itself is not complicated. It's very simple. We just want to offer everything that we have to Krishna. You know what makes it complicated is just our mind and the impressions we've gathered, the funny conceptions we've gathered over lifetimes. Yeah, that's what makes it complicated. We think that, yeah, this should be like that should be like this. And we're always thinking in terms of, just our body and mind and so on. And we're thinking in selfish ways and the bodily conception of life. And so, yeah, we don't get the full understanding of things. We get some understanding and then we understand it in some extreme way, right? And so then we make some mistakes. Then we have to learn from those mistakes. So, but that's why Shastra is there. If we read Shastra regularly, actually devotional service becomes simple. If we don't read Shastra regularly, try it. Because what are we working with? We're just working with our mind and the mind's impressions. So then we have to learn really through the hard way. Then we make a lot of mistakes, but when you're regularly in touch with Shastra, you're learning what's right, what's wrong, how exactly to navigate the path step by step. There's so much clarity that comes. And even the introspection, it's not like I just have to sit and, kind of figure this all out in my head, It's really not like that. Like when you read Bhagavatam regularly, I mean, it's so beautiful. Bhagavatam has such a way of kind of putting us in our place, I like to say, it accurately, very nicely tells us where exactly we are, where we're going wrong, all that. But simultaneously, it's not like we're just left lost, because all of that, we are learning in a manner that it's fully connected to Krishna. So you never feel lost, you never feel discouraged, you always see the path also, right? But then, like we were talking earlier, so somebody who's only just too much doing anartha nivritti, right? Just focusing on removing anarthas sometimes, right? The jnanis do that. And sometimes devotees also do that, where the focus is too much on removal of anarthas. So if the focus is too much on removal of anarthas without this proper connection to the source, right, where this vidya is not being cultivated regularly, then you can feel a little lost. It can feel a little overwhelming. But when you do both simultaneously, when you read Bhagavatam simultaneously, Prabhupada's purports are so wonderful that in a very natural way, he actually helps us study Vidya and Avidya simultaneously. His purports are wonderful, our Acharya's commentaries are wonderful, and Bhagavatam as it is so wonderful that very naturally we are cultivating both simultaneously. So, you just naturally develop more and more humility, but a healthy sense of humility, not this feeling like I'm just so small and lost in some way, or feeling hopeless in some way, or feeling overwhelmed in some way. Maybe I over answered your comment or commented too much on your comment, but inspired to.
Yeah, it was very nice, Mataji. When we look at the aspect of bhakti, which is supposed to be simple, but now devotees are expected to learn vidya, avidya. So there is a little bit of reading that acquiring of knowledge is there. but I was always under the impression that even an illiterate can practice bhakti. But after
Yes.
going through this, it's looking that it's not possible for them. That is one aspect of it. Second
It's
aspect of it,
possible.
yeah.
Yeah, go ahead. I'll
I
let you
understand.
finish.
Yes,
Go
yes.
ahead.
It's possible, but it's not that easy. Yeah, they have to hear from the senior Vaishnavas and all that, and they need to spend more time. That is one part. Second part is that when we look at the Ishopanishad itself, where it says that everything belongs to Krishna. Yes, we knew that, but I knew that, but to an extent where it says that we need to use only what is necessary for ourselves, and the rest is to the leave it to Krishna, because everything belongs to him.
Mhm,
Those
mhm.
uh, things to use practically in our life, it's for me it's quite not possible. But unless we come to that level, it is not possible for us to completely get into devotion. So these are
Yeah,
the things that's now getting into my mind and playing, and also
yeah,
the aspect of how we need to be not bodily connected. Either it is with the family, like wife or children or parents. So that is a detachment. To that extent, we need to go. Yeah, these are the
yeah,
things which I always thought it's all part of the Jnana Yoga, but now it all needs to be applied now. Yeah, so those are the
yeah.
things that is getting into my things.
Mm. So you said the simple and the illiterate can also practice bhakti. That's very true. But so the thing is that when somebody has bhakti, knowledge and detachment automatically come, right? And 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 when you see like a simple person, I mean, there's one example I always remember. This was one devotee's parent. They used to live in Jagannath Puri, like really, really simple family. And it was my first time to Puri, and we actually stayed in their home and so on. It's such a simple, home. But this lady, the mother of this devotee, used to live in Chicago, no, not Chicago, anyway, Indiana somewhere. This mother of this devotee, just a simple lady. She didn't know English. She didn't know much of anything. But she would just see like the temple of Jagannath even from outside, and she would have tears in her eyes. And I was like, oh my goodness, like I know so much, but I don't have that devotion, you know. She's and when she would speak very simply, but it was like the essences of our Shastra. She had this realization of what Shastra is telling us, right? How is that possible? I was thinking, but we know how is it possible? It's possible because she did her work in her previous lives. Maybe she studied, maybe she learned, maybe she served in all possible ways. And this life is simple, but she has all the essences. So we have to do our work in some life or the other. That's the thing. Nobody gets it, truly easy. And some of us have more bhakti, some of us have less bhakti, but it doesn't matter where we are. When we read Shastra regularly, it has a way of awakening bhakti, and it keeps things balanced rather than leaving it to ourselves and kind of figuring it out in our mind in some way and then developing some false conceptions, right? Many of us in the modern world, we're not so simple hearted. Our false egos are very strong. Many of us come from academic backgrounds. We've done well in our academics, and then we bring those conceptions into our spiritual life. Oh, I'm a great, I'm a topper in IIT or a topper in BITS Pilani or whatever, and we think we can just get it. I understand all these principles, and I'll just do it, and I'll get it, and I'll become the best devotee. I'll get a gold medal. It really doesn't work like that. So we have all this conditioning, and therefore things are much more complicated. Bhakti is not complicated. What's complicated is our own minds, our own funny conceptions about ourselves, right? So yeah, thank you for that. It's always nice when somebody comments and we can have some further discussion. Is there one more comment perhaps? or a reflection?
Hare Krishna Mataji.
Yeah.
So for all these things, we need guidance.
Yes. Very
So
much so.
can you please throw some light on this? How do we get the guidance? And the second point I like to hear from you is some untimely renunciation. It came up. So I also would like to hear from you something about that
Yeah.
untimely renunciation.
Why don't you all discuss? Maybe Navdeep Sachi, could you organize little groups just even to discuss these questions over this week, over the next few days? And maybe I would like to hear a little summary points of what y'all came up after the discussion with, and then we can take it further from there. I'd like you to put a little thought. Yeah. Because I know you all are very capable and you're very good devotees. Oh, what was your first question? I forgot. It's my Kali Yuga memory. Refresh my memory again. What was your first question? I almost had it.
That is the guidance, Mataji.
Oh, guidance, right. So guidance, well, we have guidance from spiritual master, but of course, spiritual masters, they have many, many disciples and they cannot offer as much personal guidance as they would like to all the devotees. So then we have to take guidance from, the more senior devotees than us. Find some devotee with whom you have some natural relationship already, or somebody that you trust, in your congregation. And, it could be maybe if you have a Bhakti Riksha kind of group or some group, it could be your group facilitator sometimes, it could be someone else, but somebody that you trust and who is more senior than you, that you can approach for this kind of guidance regularly. And, we all need more guidance in our initial years. And then as we go along, we capture many of these things and we know how to apply it in a balanced way. And then maybe we need guidance for more kind of life altering kind of situations. But we need less guidance for other day-to-day things. But yeah, the guidance is so important, yeah. And we can also take guidance. We can have multiple Shiksha gurus, right? We can, some are more expert in certain areas. So you take guidance for those things from them. Some are more expert in some other areas. But when you're taking guidance, one thing you need to make sure is that their guidance kind of aligns with your Diksha Guru's guidance also, that their guidance nourishes your faith in your Diksha Guru as well. It should not take away from that. And that doesn't mean that the Shiksha or the person who's giving you guidance has to, be also have the same spiritual master. It doesn't have to be. It can be anyone. But they must have sufficient maturity to kind of understand the mood of your spiritual master and nourish your faith in your spiritual master too, right? It's a huge topic. There's a nice book. There's a very nice book if you can get hold of it. It's called Shiksha and Diksha by Shivram Swami. Read that. Read that. It'll give you a lot of understanding about these topics. I don't remember if it's on the folio also. I'll have to look for it. Maybe it's on the folio, but Google it, you'll find it. Maybe there's a PDF copy somewhere. I'll also look for it. If I find it, then if I find a PDF, I'll send it to Navdeep Sachi and she can share it with the group. Okay.
Thank you.
Right.
Thank you so much.
All right. Okay, so we have half an hour. Let's see if we can finish text 12, mantra 12. Oops. Okay, mantra 12. So this is going to closely follow Mantra 9's theme. It's very similar. The verse itself sounds very similar. Let's read the verse. Let me just get a little water. Andam tama pravishanti ye sambhutim upasate tato bhuya ivate tamoya usambhutyam rataha. Those who are engaged in the worship of demigods enter into the darkest region of ignorance, and still more so do the worshippers of the impersonal absolute. Again, this is a purported translation. It doesn't say in the verse itself that's the impersonal absolute. It actually just says in the Sambhutyam, even Prabhupada translates in the word to word as in the absolute. And a Sambhutim translates as demigods. But we'll discuss these words, a little bit more. And again, it seems a bit shocking, just like the 9th verse. Come on, people who worship demigods. I mean, it's not like so bad. I mean, they go to the heavenly planets. It's not so bad. Why are you saying darkest region of ignorance? And then the worshippers of impersonal absolute, they still go to even darker darkness, darker ignorance. How is it possible? So in mantra 12 to 14, we're going to hear about comparing worship of the absolute to worship of the relative. So these two words, asambhutim and sambhuti, another word for that is absolute and relative. I think we've already discussed the connection in one sense. Mantra 11 describes that one must obtain knowledge while understanding nations to transcend material conception. And Mantra 12 describes two kinds of people who cannot do this, as well as their fate. And the theme is that the demigod worshippers with their tiny brain power and the unintelligent impersonalists, they cannot understand the absolute truth. So let's just look at these two words quickly. Absolute means sambhuti, and that means that completely independent of everything. It's the source of all powers. So that's the absolute. And that's only Krishna as we know it. There is only one Krishna, Ishvara, the master of everything, who's completely independent of anyone or anything. And relative or asambhuti means that you're dependent on something else. One may be powerful, but their powers are limited. So Prabhupada writes demigods as the Sambhuti, but it could also be others, right? So there's different types of worship. So there's the absolute truth, the impersonal feature, the demigods, and you can also include the powerful human beings. So the devotees, we know they worship the absolute truth. The sense gratifiers may worship either demigods or impersonal features, and the mental speculators, sense gratifiers 3 and 4, and mental speculators number 2. So these are the relative objects of worship, the demigods, the human beings, the impersonal feature. So Prabhupada talks a lot about the demigods here. So the demigods are invested with powers by Krishna to control and regulate the created universe, right? We all know this. And the demigod worshippers, so we're going to go through this quickly because it's a familiar topic, I'm sure, for all of you. So the demigod worshippers, would they accept a superior authority, right? And they accept some regulation in their life, but their motivation is not quite right. Their motivation is sense gratification. And we know from Bhagavad Gita also that, anything material in terms of sense gratification, that's just temporary, and it ends sooner or later. So then why would you want to get that? person with good intelligence wouldn't want that. So therefore, Krishna says that their intelligence, it's small, it's meager, it's alpa. They just want temporary relief of their temporary problems, and then they go to temporary planets, right? And they remain in darkness. So how is it darkness? A nice analogy is given here. Well, let's see, before that, just like to say maybe that, some people really think that demigod worship may not be as good as worship of Krishna, but it's also, not bad. It's not something hurtful. Like people will say, am I doing anything wrong by worshiping? It's not like you're doing something wrong. It's actually fine. It's okay. It's not like a bad thing you're doing. But, the thing to really understand is that it's not going to lead us to the ultimate, and we understand from the traditional understanding or the yoga ladder understanding that, they are somewhere on the yoga ladder because they're regulating themselves, because they're accepting a superior authority. What happens is the moment you accept a superior authority and the moment you accept regulation, our consciousness is elevated to some degree, right? And when the consciousness is elevated and these demigod worshippers, they do all these pujas and so on. So then they come in contact with the priests, and eventually then they start hearing about life beyond this world also, right? And they hear the concept of eternality, and eventually they may then come in contact with, the worship of the absolute. So it's not all, bad in one sense, but it's just that it's very, very slow, and you can get attached to that particular demigod, and you can get attached to sense gratification and that comfort and so on. And that's why it's bad, right? And how is this darkness? Prabhupada gives this nice analogy of a coconut, right? So the coconut analogy, it has the hard shell outside, and then there's water. So the universe is exactly like that. It's half filled with water. It's the Garbhodaka ocean there, the cross section of the universe. And that's like the coconut water. And then no light enters. Nothing from outside actually enters the coconut, right? That's why you give it to patients. It's like pure, right? In the hot, just right next to hospitals in India, you'll always see a lot of coconut walas. So anyway, not to take it away from this discussion, but so there's many layers of the universe, that there's 7 layers of the universe, and there's dense darkness, and there's sun and moon is required for illumination. So it's still dark in the sense that it's still within the material realm. So in that way, the demigods are going to the dark regions. It doesn't mean that they're going to the hellish regions. It just means that dark regions in the sense that they're going to remain in the material universe. So ISOPANISAD is advising us to not bother with any destination within this material world, but actually try to get out of it, go to the effulgent kingdom of God, as Prabhupada says, right? I'm sure you all heard of this Christian preacher who he was preaching to a coal mine worker, and he says, you should accept Jesus, otherwise you'll go to hell. And so this guy, the coal mine worker, he says, what is hell? And the preacher says, well, it's dark, it's hot, it's miserable, and the coal mine worker says, well, the coal mine is like that. So, I don't mind going to hell, right? Or anyway, so in that sense, dark. So we shouldn't bother with this. So the problems of life, they cannot be solved simply by going to the moon. One must not bother with any destination within this dark material universe, but try to get out of it and reach the effulgent kingdom of God. And what does Krishna say about demigod worship in Bhagavad Gita, right? He also explains in the beginning when he's talking about Karma Kanda in 3rd chapter, he talks about how the men and demigods, by their cooperation, they can create prosperity for this universe when they do their sacrifices and so on, and the demigods become happy, right? But then later in the 7th chapter, Krishna calls them, fools or men of small intelligence, because they are, just worshipping for something limited and temporary. And then in chapter 9, Krishna calls them totally wrong. Yeah. Those who are devotees of other gods and who worship them with faith actually worship only me, but they do so in the wrong way. Avidhi Purvakam. So both the Bhagavad Gita and ISOPANISAD both are condemning demigod worship. And then we're also hearing about the worshippers of the impersonal Brahman here. So it's being said that they go to even a darker region. So in Mantra 12, we're hearing many philosophers and great rishis or mystics try to distinguish the absolute from the relative by their tiny brain power. This can only help them reach the negative conception of the absolute without realizing any positive trace of the absolute, right? So this is the process of neti that we were talking about earlier. Okay, it's not this, so the absolute is not this, it's not that, it's not that, it's not that. So by that, what is the conclusion they come to, the impersonalists? Okay, the absolute truth is something not material, but they cannot understand the positive spirit by just going through this process of neti. Positive cannot actually simply be conceptualized by our tiny mental speculation capacity. It has to be understood through disciplic succession. Yeah. So there's this beautiful paragraph in this purport to only read. The definition of the absolute by negation is not complete. Such negative definitions lead one to create a concept of one's own. Thus one imagines that the absolute must be formless and without qualities. Such negative qualities are simply the reversals of relative material qualities and are therefore also relative. By conceiving of the absolute in this way, one can at the most reach the impersonal effulgence of God known as Brahman, but one cannot make further progress to Bhagavan, personality of Godhead. So in what way is the impersonal Brahman relative? It's just that we're simply negating the material concept, right? And it's also dependent on the absolute truth. And Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita, he's saying something very similar. The unintelligent men who do not know me perfectly, think that I, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, was impersonal before and have now assumed this personality. Due to their small knowledge, they do not know my higher nature, which is imperishable and supreme. And then there's this famous verse in the Bhagavatam. Anyarvindaksha vimuktamaninas tvayashta bhavat avishuddha buddhaya. If you've heard Prabhupada lectures, you've heard this verse, avishuddha buddhaya, right? So this verse comes up in the prayers of the demigods. So someone may say that aside from devotees who always seek shelter at the Lord's lotus feet, there are those who are not devotees, but who have accepted different processes for attaining salvation. What happens to them? So in answer to this question, Lord Brahma and the other demigods, they say, O lotus-eyed Lord, although non-devotees who accept severe austerities and penances to achieve the highest position may think themselves liberated, their intelligence is impure. They fall down from their position of imagined superiority because they have no regard for your lotus feet. So basically, without, this understanding of the Supreme Lord, which we can only get through the disciplic succession, our intelligence can never become completely purified. Yes. So therefore, you'll fall down again. So, Burjan Prabhu gives a very nice example, which I like so much. He gives the example of somebody who, a farmer, right? A farmer, he is cultivating wheat and so on, right? But just by eating chapatis, suppose somebody makes you some nice chapatis, and just by eating chapatis, you cannot actually understand who the farmer is, what's his nature, how many children he has, what he likes, what he doesn't like, and so on. You cannot come to that full positive understanding of who this person farmer is. You can analyze the chapati all you want, break it down to the atoms, right? So you may understand something about what the chapati is and what the chapati is not, but you will never understand actually the source, right? So similarly, our brains are too small. All the mental speculation we could engage in, it's not going to be enough to figure out who the Supreme Lord is. It's a descending process. So now another thing in this verse we're hearing is that impersonalists, they encourage atheism. I think this is one of your, questions in, question bank or homework questions. So many devotees ask. So I thought I'll just put it as a slide. So how do impersonalists encourage atheism? So one thing is that they deny the form of the Lord, right? And they encourage also one to rely on their own strength. And they may even believe that they are God. And we also see that they themselves, they may actually fall down. And that affects the faith of others because people see that they're not able to actually follow what they're preaching. And they fall down, they're not walking their talk. And so people lose faith in them, and then they lose faith in God. So they claim to represent the absolute truth, but because they misbehave, people become disappointed and they reject spirituality altogether. And then because of this, they go to hell. And they also have no respect for parampara. And they just become self-made, acharyas. So they do not even worship demigods or anything like that. And when a person, he doesn't see things in connection to the parampara, either by themselves or, if one who follows them doesn't see that, it can cause actually so much havoc in one's life. Because ultimately it's only Krishna's mercy that transforms us. Like Srila Prabhupada always wanted Bhakti Siddhanta's deity to actually be with him. Because he was always feeling the presence of Bhakti Siddhanta so much in his life and his guidance constantly. He would say that, I'm never alone, right? But the impersonalists, they don't see that connection to the parampara, no respect. So when we don't see the members of disciplic succession also in connection with the parampara, then it can also affect us sooner or later, right? So we must always try to see everyone in connection with the disciplic succession. Nobody is, just by themselves, And a couple other things. These are just straight from the purport, but Prabhupada talks about the pseudo-religionists. These are like the Vedavada Rathas kind of in text 9, right? We talked enough about them, so I'm not going to dwell on it, just quoting this part of the purport. So they just, present a whole show of devotional service, while indulging in all sorts of immoral activities. It's just imitation. And what does Kapila Dev say about imitation? Or what does he call imitation? If he says, this is Kapila speaking himself, so he's saying, I am present in every living entity as a super soul. If someone neglects or disregards that super soul everywhere and engages himself in the worship of the deity in the temple, that is simply imitation. So these people actually don't see that Krishna connection at all in others. They're just, simply doing it for some show. And when you do it for some show, are you going to get any result? No result. Actually, you can get very dark results. And Prabhupada ends the purport with how to know Krishna. The devotees of Krishna, by dint of their surrendering unto him and their unalloyed devotion, can know that he's the absolute person and that everything emanates from him. Such devotees continuously render loving service unto Krishna, the fountainhead of everything. The Lord states that as soon as one reaches him by devotional service, which is the one and only way to approach the personality of Godhead, one attains complete freedom from the bondage of birth and death. In other words, the path of salvation from the material clutches fully depends on the principles of knowledge and detachment gained from serving the Lord. So it's not just by book knowledge. Even a child understands Krishna. They get amazing realizations. Actually, children get such amazing realizations. But scientists and academicians, even with their big brains, they don't get the realizations that little children can get, simply because they don't accept God. So it's not the brain power, it's actually the quality of consciousness. So again, the comment that, what was that devotee's name? Sadananda, was it? Sadananda, I think, yeah. Yeah. So it can seem very complicated and so on when we're really just trying to use our brain power to figure out everything, But it's actually not as complicated when we receive this knowledge in disciplic succession and humbly take it up and apply it in our lives. So I'll just stop there. We could say a few more things, but let's see if there's some discussion.
Hare Krishna Mataji.
Hare Krishna.
Mataji, in slide where you have shown about devotees, then impersonalist and demigod worshippers. So we also have a faith in Krishna as well as our Diksha and Shiksha Guru, right? So is it not the same? Means why you have not added in the slide that we offer our prayers to both Guru as well as Krishna?
I'm sorry, I don't know if I completely caught your question. I think your question is about, when I listed the different types of worship under Sambhuti and
Correct.
Asambhuti.
Fourth slide, I think third or fourth slide.
So your question is, why did I not include worship of spiritual master and advanced devotees, acharyas, and so on? Is that what your question is? Well, how come there's demigods? How come there's demigods, but I didn't include this? Yeah, we could include that in the category of absolute, but I didn't include it. So that is Sambhuti, actually. That's not Asambhuti. So Asambhuti, I just included powerful persons. Yeah, but that is different from worship of acharyas. The worship of acharyas and advanced devotees is much, much greater than the worship of demigods. That's important for us to capture. It's not on the same level. Although demigods are very, very advanced souls, but still, being connected to the disciplic succession and worship of acharyas is, it's a different platform altogether. Yeah. But yeah, we could include it in the absolute category in one sense, but it has to be understood again in proper balance.
Correct.
Yeah, because it's not like, spiritual master is not God. He's not the absolute truth. Okay, anything else?
Hare Krishna Mataji, then Prema Mataji.
Who is speaking?
Mataji
I have to
Vishnu.
find the box. I have to find the box that's unmuted. Oh, there you are. Okay. Yeah. Vishnu Priya.
Yeah, Mataji, Hare Krishna Mataji. Mataji, I just have a doubt about this topic, Mataji. There is one elderly Mataji in one of the groups we preach here. So that Mataji, every Dwadashi, she invites us in front of her house, there is a tree. So she thinks God has manifested in the form of tree in front of her house. She got a dream that God is there. Now no need of go to temple, you please worship me here only, like that. So she says that to everyone, and she distributes prasadam on Dwadashi day, Mataji. So she wanted every one of us to come there and do some prasadam distribution she's doing as of now. So as I preach them, so she invites every time me to come there and do sankirtan or whatever it is. So I just have a doubt whether we should encourage that or not. Like for me, since lot of days I'm thinking to ask anyone.
This is very good, So I would like help from all of you to answer this question. I'm not going to answer it, but I would like all of your assistance. Please answer Vishnu Priya, because we just went through this section. Help out. Help Vishnu Priya. And help me too. Please don't be shy. We just want to have a little discussion here. There's no right or wrong answer. Don't worry. You won't be put in a prison. You won't be shamed for it. Okay. Come forward, my dear devotees.
Hare Krishna.
What would be your response? Yeah, just respond to Vishnu Priya directly, like you're talking to her.
Yeah, Hare Krishna Vishnu Priya Mataji. It's a dilemma-full questions. Though Krishna, like mentioned in Bhagavad Gita, he resides in everyone's heart, every living entity is in like a tree. As that Mataji has that dream and she has convinced that it's God, but I'm not sure like to what extent other can accept. Yeah, it's a really dilemma for me, and to what extent it can be, like continued for the preaching purposes. But yes, of course, if some other instructions can be given by Lord. Currently in Jagannath Puri, all the instructions Jagannath gives only in the dream or somewhere or other, by some instructions. If that can happen, maybe, it will be helpful for all of you to accept that.
Okay, who else can say something else? We have 4 minutes, so let's take 2 more minutes from all of you and then we'll conclude.
Hare Krishna. If that Mataji is offering the prasadam, as you said, they are doing prasadam distribution. If she is offering it to to Lord Krishna and then distributing, and Sankirtan, if it is Hare Krishna Mahamantra, it is being done, then I feel it's okay. Once in every 15 days, the people, maybe the intention is different, but we are giving Harinam and Prasad. So that's okay. Hare Krishna.
What about the worship of the tree? Yeah, Radha Seva.
Well, I was going to say that she said that your Vishnupriya Mataji, your friend said that it's not necessary to go to the temple, right? That just come here and worship. No, you have to go to the temple to see the deities. So I have an issue with that tree thing. But yes, if she's distributing prasadam and if it's been offered to the Lord, then yeah, that's fine. You can have a little gathering there. But it's still necessary. Worshiping the tree does not negate you not going to the temple. I find that that's incorrect on her part to say. But then again, also there are some people that if they have so much faith, you can. I still have issues with what she's saying. I would personally be going to the temple, not gathering under the tree.
Yeah. Yeah, it's
back to my mind, Mataji, like later on, not going to temple, that's another part, like, it should not be like this. Anyway, in our day-to-day life, we are doing Sankirtan, going, different places, doing the Sankirtan for the benefit of us, as well as, whoever will be listening. So in that sense, doing the Sankirtan and having Prasad, Krishna Prasad, underneath a tree is fine, but not going to temple, that is something, concern.
Yeah. Okay, so there's several parts to what you presented, actually, Vishnupriya. So one is, no need to go to temple, just worship the tree. So, I mean, she may have faith that, it's questionable. I don't know what is the dream she got, and I don't know who this person is. I don't know her level of consciousness and all that. So I don't know, like, to really say, maybe she really had some dream. I don't know. But whatever it is, there's something to consider. We don't want to disturb her faith too much, because Krishna says if somebody is attached, don't disturb their faith. But then you have to kind of gently see how to encourage her, and at the same time not hurt the faith of others, because that's a responsibility. So yeah, okay, Krishna may be there in this tree according to her dream. That's questionable for me. But, if Krishna is there in the tree, is he not there in the deity that's established by our acharyas? That we've done the whole installation and we invited Krishna to reside in the deity, and the deity is actually non-different from Krishna. So it doesn't negate somebody going to the temple. And so you could tell her something like, yeah, we don't want to disturb others' faith, and we want to follow according to Shastra and so on. And the deities are non-different from Krishna. His presence in the tree doesn't mean that he's not there in the temple also. And even the tree, I would confirm, that we are recommended according to Shastra to actually confirm any significant insights or realization, like spiritual insights or realizations with somebody more advanced. So this is something major in one sense, to call a tree, that, okay, this is Krishna. It's very significant. So I would encourage her and say that, I would go to a very advanced devotee, and share with them, this is what happened. What do you say? I'm just keeping it generic because I don't know this person and so on. If it was somebody that I knew, I may answer more directly, Yeah, and as far as, as long as she's not offering bhoga to the tree and distributing, it would be acceptable.
Yeah.
If she should offer properly, and she needs some training there. Or maybe the option is that you cook and take, and then you do some kirtan and she can distribute also, Yeah.
Yeah, so
I'm sure
that's what my thoughts also on both these sides. I was struggling how to take this personally, Mataji. So Srila Prabhupada, I used to remember that Srila Prabhupada used to tell whatever practices are already there, it's enough for us to practice them, right? No need to invent something new and ask other members. We are not qualified to do so. So I used to think like that. If Krishna is there in the tree, Krishna is there in everything, every living organism, non-living thing, everywhere Krishna is there. So I'm also not sure. As you have said, I need to check first whether I don't think they're offering it to Krishna first, and then I think they're thinking, she's thinking tree is Krishna. I mean, Krishna is there in the tree, and she's offering to it and asking everyone else also to do so. So, but as you said, I don't want to disturb her faith as well, as she's attached with that, and I don't want to disturb her also. But as you said, I can suggest her to offer it to Krishna first, and then if she could distribute, it will be a prashadam.
Yeah, I mean, better would be that someone else brings the boga too. I mean, someone else cooks and offers and brings it for distribution, honestly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and speak from Shastra, give her education, without sometimes you don't need to directly confront the issue at hand unless it's causing too much disturbance to the broader community, but give education. So bring up topics, during your outreach, connected in some way, and bring out these topics and discuss the importance of disciplic succession and so on. You can discuss ISOPANISAD.
She's a very elderly woman, Mataji, and she
okay.
does. I don't bother about all these things. I don't want all like this, but she's very good. Do very nice services. She believes in God. She listens and attends all the classes and all. So that's why I want. This is very sensitive matter. So I don't know how what to do. Yeah.
So be respectful. You be respectful and speak from Shastra. That's not bad.
Sure.
Yeah, so because she's elderly, so you be respectful. But you consider how to explain in a way that she understands without just quoting too many shlokas or something, Don't make it complicated, but just simple. Keep it simple, but speak from Shastra.
Sure.
Oh, that's wonderful. So that's wonderful what you're saying, Mataji. But, I would like to share what, also our Shastra says, and we're meant to live according to Shastra. And, maybe you can help me understand how to connect these two or something. Just be creative, how to present it. Yeah. Okay, I think we need to stop. We're 5 minutes over today. So we shall continue on Tuesday. We'll do the next 2 verses. I think it's just good to keep 2 at a time. Keeps at good pace. Try to cram 3, then I just have to rush through it too much and we can't have any discussion. Okay, so 3 more classes will be done. All right, thank you very much. Hare Krishna.